Okay, cool. Record button is on. Testing 1, testing 2, testing 1, testing 2, testing. What? 1, 2, 2. What you got, Alan?
Are we testing? I just went through a test on Saturday. This is rough.
Welcome back to the Saber Martial Arts Podcast. We're in the 50s. We're in the mid to late 50s by now, which is pretty crazy. If you have been listening up to this point, you have heard some great guests as of late. We're talking Sensei Mike Yamasaki. We're talking appearances from K Sensei. We're talking Darth Anonymous is on, I think, more than one episode recently.
Correct.
We've got the light fencing commentaries that have been up by this point. We've got the San Diego Sabers Labor Day Barbecue. We've got interviews with what's the group we did in France? Those guys. Oh my gosh.
Lightsaber Path.
Thank you, Lightsaber Path. I knew lightsaber was in the word. Duh. And so we're
we got Evan from Missouri as well.
That's right. Which is like an associate of Vince in Lightsaber's Path. And we also had Olympian Sakura Kokomai on the show that you will have heard by this point. Again, if you've stuck with us this long, that will likely be I don't think it's the episode right before this. I think right before this might be the Labor Day Barbecue, but right before that you will have heard Olympian Sakura Kokomai, the only Olympic karateka who participated for America in the female division. Super cool. And that's a lot of stuff. Also, if you are following some of the local stuff that we do, you probably will have seen that by this point, Saberlight Knights has done their Praxium, which Alan is actually heading out to. So by the time you're hearing this, it will have been the past, but as we're recording it, it's happening in the future, a couple days into the future. Alan, I know that anybody hearing this won't have the chance to actually attend, but why don't you just kind of go over really quickly what people can expect to see from the Saberlight, maybe their YouTube or their social media channel, what they can kind of expect to see coming out of the Praxium, or including our channels as well.
So if you are following us at all on YouTube, you can go over to Saberlight Knights on YouTube, and they have a fight night just about every week where they review their fights for the week and their events that they go to. They have special guests every week. Ryan and Roland do a great job just kind of corralling people to make sure that they can review their fights, which is always good.
Yeah.
You can big shout out to Courtney Monroe, who is the progenitor of Saberlight Knights. And also, he has built a great community over there with their with all of their people. They actually have now a satellite school as well, so they're growing. And I believe at Praxium, I will be seeing Chad and Damon there from USA Light Fencing. I'm not sure if Commander will be there, but he's usually close by. But I don't know if the hurricane actually is stopping him from coming.
Oh, that's a good point. Didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of other people coming in. I believe there's a couple of HEMA people as well.
And I'm not sure. I know he was looking to get Sir Black Wolf to come teach. He may have actually gotten that to happen, which is pretty cool. I was going to go out and do a tomahawk, sort of a vibe, maybe a little form. It just didn't work. It my son is turning 2 in 2 days, and I believe the Praxium starts in 2 or 3 days. So it
Right.
just didn't work out for me this year.
Okay, so I got confirmation. Looks like Commander and Aiken Saber is sending a team to compete in Praxium War.
Oh,
That's
nice.
good to know. Um, I know that Saberlight Knights has sent teams to other people's stuff. So, for example, a couple of them went in and did the Lightsaber League tournament in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Uh, they got first and third, I think, and then yep, there's a bunch of stuff in their Facebook as to when all this stuff is happening. There's a ton of there's just a ton of stuff here as far as like teachers,
Yeah.
Damon Honeycutt, Chad, from USA Life Fencing. They got, oh yeah, I'll be teaching there too.
I was gonna say you didn't even mention yourself. I kind of
Yeah,
did, but I didn't really like specifically. But
yeah.
yes,
So there's a bunch of people
it's
coming in.
it's pretty cool. It's very similar to a lot of ideas that Eric and myself and Alan and our late founder Steve have had in the past. Courtney is one of the first to really kind of breathe a little life into that idea. So it's kind of exciting in that regard. So like I said, if you're listening to this, it will have been in the past for you, but like probably by the time you're listening to this, you'll see stuff on the Saberlight YouTube, the Saberlight Instagram,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah.
as well as our own. But excuse me,
Also,
I burped.
Alec, also Alec Martinez is going to be there, I believe. But he is in Florida and he got hit by the other hurricane.
Well, I was gonna say, kind of on that vein, not the hurricane, but Florida. Actually, I would even say Virginia is probably number one as far as like lightsaber activity on the East Coast, and definitely the eastern half of the United States. I would say Virginia's right up there with the hottest of hotbeds of lightsaber activity right now.
Absolutely.
Almost like a San Diego of the East or a SoCal of the East.
Right. Oh, also, it looks like our buddy Alan Block is going to be.
I was going to say, I thought Alan was coming to or Alan was coming to teach something. So that's it's a pretty eclectic spread, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
There's going to be a tournament as well. So keep your eyes and ears peeled as you're listening to this for that stuff on the internet already, and for it to be released as this is kind of airing as well. So that all being said, let's kind of jump into what we're doing tonight. Alan doesn't even know what we're doing tonight, which is great. I've had this idea for a few weeks now. I didn't really have a good time to posit it to you, and tonight we were kind of, I don't want to say short on recording material, but we were kind of like, not even really sure if we were going to record. So here we are. We're going to talk tonight. It's kind of a continuation of a conversation we had a couple months ago about, or it's more than a couple months ago now, about some of the Star Wars video games, some of the lightsaber combat. But tonight, I think what I'd like to discuss is more some of the video games specifically that have influenced martial arts and saber martial arts in more of a positive way, as far as like demonstrating to the player or the viewer or the consumer what martial arts actually might look like were it to be done by X character, Y character, or in the style of this type of. And as we kind of discuss, I think this will all become a little clearer. But I wanted to go off of the Star Wars vein tonight, not too far, just in the sense that we're going to talk about games that aren't Star Wars games. So the last time we had this talk, I want to say the episode is called "I Spent So Many Quarters." So go back and check that episode out. Really fun episode. And I think it ended up being a lot more fun than we planned it to be. So hopefully that happens tonight too. So kind of let's set the stage a little bit, Alan. For people who have been in martial arts for a long time, there's kind of this, I don't know if it's an inside joke or like these mumblings and rumblings about how like really a lot of our job, especially as teachers, martial arts teachers, a lot of our job is being done for us by media. YouTube and video games and movies.
Sure.
Right. And that's kind of always the way it's been definitely since the Bruce Lee days. But I feel like with the way that the advances in ability for teachers to reach people through like YouTube and things like that, it really is becoming more of a legitimate source of information. And I think with the technology of video games, I'm thinking back on a few specific ones right now, but like the motion capture and really it dates all the way back to like Mortal Kombat, right? The original Mortal Kombat games, they would have real actors doing things, real martial artists doing like moves and things for the game. And now we're kind of coming full circle and we're doing that again. We're taping little mocap balls to people in blue suits and green suits and we're making them do their martial arts on camera for video games. And what we're getting a lot of the time these days is really impressive. So you kind of vibing with what I'm putting down here so far, Alan?
Sure.
So let's keep unpacking. How do you feel about like, just in a general high level sense, how do you feel about like people being exposed to maybe for the first time or maybe in a way that makes them actually go out to like a martial arts gym and try something? How do you feel about that as far as like video games and that kind of thing are concerned?
Well, a lot of things happen to get somebody. A lot of things have to happen to get somebody into a dojo, right?
Yeah.
And for for a lot of people, like if you think about it, if we go in the Wayback Machine, people didn't even know what the heck this stuff was until somebody went, "Hey, have you heard about this Bruce Lee guy?"
Yeah.
You know. Have you seen Green Hornet? There's this dude that does amazing things.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, so then came that little explosion of, Black Belt Theater and all that stuff, and then a little movie called The Karate Kid came out, and and then it was in people's heads, and then video games started to become more prevalent. So you had games like Kung Fu and games like Karate Master that are all just like 4-bit scrolling.
Super Punch Out. Eventually, you get a little more depth and stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of history with popular media and martial arts, and then you have all of the movies from the 70s that the Shaw Brothers and all these guys that have done it, and so that's the generation that I came from. That was like I saw it in. I mean, why does somebody pick up a sword? You don't see one on the street every day. They saw it in some sort of media.
You're right. Exactly.
Because even the best book in the world can't really capture a sword fight better than a visual medium.
That's a good point.
So a lot of that happens now in our day and age. There's a lot more media out there. I mean, there's so much media.
And it's a lot more interactive. I think that's kind of what I was getting at with the intro. And now that I'm saying that, I'm realizing what I was getting at.
Yeah. So not there, at least in our part of the world, we don't get. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of wuxia, which is what the Chinese call their martial arts movies, and those are all based upon a lot of the old legends, and also like creating new stories or retelling the same stories just with retelling It's fine. Retelling the same stories with a martial arts bent to them. So like they've done a good job of keeping it in our uh, collective mindset, and that's part of their culture as well. And then you have people in Indonesia and in Thailand doing all these things too because they also have all these things. So nowadays, when we see a movie or a video game with it with martial arts, a lot of it is meant to be like, oh, check this out, because we put a mocap suit on somebody to do it, or that's really a guy doing
Yeah.
it. And a lot of credit to that, I feel, comes from the Demura family, who Sensei Demura was the guy that Mr. Miyagi was based on. He was
Mm-hmm.
Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Miyagi's stunt double, and the script, the writers actually based Mr. Miyagi on Sensei Demura. And then look at how that is back in our culture again, right? Cobra Kai is one of the hottest series on Netflix right now. And then you start to look at, okay, well, that's that culture. All right, can we look at some other cultures? You look at Black Panther, and now you see all sort of African martial arts and show up in that, and it's just like very cool to watch and see. The Woman King, they show a bunch of the martial arts in that, and then you have other cultures as well, including our own. Our version of martial arts shows up in a lot of movies now.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Adkins and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Michael Jai White and all these guys that have have come up, in the '90s
Yeah.
and early 2000s, making B movies,
Mm-hmm.
showing up and doing their thing
Yeah.
to actually showcase that. Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be Chinese to do this. Other people can do this too. You just have to put in uh, you have to put in the work, right?
Yeah.
Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, all these guys are in there.
Chuck
I mean,
Norris.
I'll put Sylvester Stallone in there because
Yeah, I would.
he is the guy to make boxing movies, right?
Well, and
Um,
I mean, boxing kind of gets left out of the martial arts conversation unless
mhm.
you're like talking about like actual sanctioned fighting. Then all of a sudden it comes back into the conversation. But
Right.
it's just as much a part of martial arts as any other one. And when you talk about Sylvester Stallone, like we're talking about an Oscar-winning martial arts
Hmm.
movie writer
Right.
and
Exactly.
portrayal of a martial artist. Now,
Well,
is Rocky
and
the
that's
greatest actual boxer ever? No, but there are actual boxers who look and
mhm.
act and have had stories just like that.
Right, and that's what I'm getting to is like that is like the Western part of it. We start to see movies like
Mm-hmm.
Lord of the Rings, where the elves and the dwarves have their own version of movement and martial arts. The
We're going to
orcs do
come
it
back to Lord of the
differently.
Rings because the Lord of
Yeah,
the Rings video games are responsible for a lot of my own
yeah,
personal hype. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about like showing excellence now in like not just like Chuck Norris is great. This is not a knock on Chuck Norris, and he always did amazing martial arts in his movies and stuff. But
hmm
you're not just showing a guy with a beard and a cowboy hat sidekicking bad guys now. You're showing
right,
like a legitimate like culture of people on screen who like these little knives that they wear on their back, like that's everything to them, right? The bow and arrow,
hmm
that's everything to them.
right,
And there are cultures in the world, like I'm thinking of Filipino culture. I mean, you're come from Filipino culture, like the
hmm
stick, the knife.
right,
That means like everything to many Filipino people who practice martial arts.
hmm
And it's so funny you bring up Lord of the Ring. Like, it's not even. You would think it would be like the long swords and stuff like. It's not even really that stuff. It's like just the warrior mindset even on screen. You know, like people like Aragorn or frickin' Sam, right? Like just that ability to stand up to something that's a challenge or something that has overpowered you already and go, you know what? I'm just not going to take defeat as an answer.
hmm
That's a pretty cool part of that kind of. I mean, it's always been in storytelling, but I feel like as the storytelling gets better, as the martial art or as the portrayal, the physical portrayals get better, it all kind of walks hand in hand.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting to is that there was a bunch of stuff that kind of permeated culture, right? So nowadays you have John Wick movies,
Oh yeah,
which
good point.
now
Good
is
point.
has not just martial arts in it, but gunplay as well. So which is a martial art in itself,
Well, what's
you
the
know,
term?
and
Gun kata, right? Is that the term for like using firearms in like hand to hand combat
yeah,
sequence?
so the gun kata came from a little movie called Equilibrium,
Okay.
which was a fun sci-fi movie. But yeah, it that movie introduced that concept, which turned into like a kind of
Like a
idea.
shorthand idea almost.
Yeah, well, it was an idea that was basically sparked by John Woo,
Right.
um,
Right. 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 Right.
and John Woo called it gun fu
Okay.
because
That's the term I couldn't fish out of my brain. Yeah.
yeah. So, but his whole thing is that he saw action uh, like a dance, and
Yeah.
in all of his movies, they're so stylistic. Like anybody that's worth anything in shooting will be like, "Why the hell are you doing that?" But
Bulletproof
they,
Monk comes to mind.
right, they're beautiful, right? And that wasn't even John Woo.
No. Wait, that wasn't
But
John Woo?
no, but
I thought that was
you,
John Woo.
Heart Chow Yun Fat was in that movie though. Um,
Maybe that's why I thought it was John Woo because he's in all the
yeah.
John Woo stuff.
Yeah, so Chow Yun Fat was in Hard Boiled, which was what kicked off their whole thing.
Oh man, that's
And then
classic.
he was in The Killer and The Protectors, and there's a whole bunch of different ones.
Oh, shout out to Paul
Hard,
Hunter for making Bulletproof Monk. That's a dope movie.
yeah,
Paul
and
Hunter's
then
the director, not John Woo.
a little remembered movie called Hard Target was his first
Oh
American movie.
man, that's that's Steven Seagal, isn't it?
It's John
No,
Claude Van
John
Damme.
Claude Van Damme. I'm sorry, John Claude Van Damme. Yeah,
Yeah,
wrong. Sexy martial arts man.
right. So that was his first thing, and that's kind of the thing is like it introduced it, and then once Face Off came out, he was just like, yeah, this is the way everybody wants to do this. He did Mission Impossible 2 and everything like that, but that I'm saying that sort of choreography planted a seed in all these stuntmen
Yes,
and
yes,
stunt
yes.
women and all these stunt performers. Now we have movies like Extraction and also John Wick and all that. But those guys actually helped make the Matrix movies.
Yes.
So all the guys that made the movies you see now were like stunt guys in the Matrix.
Well,
And then it
let's
comes back to the man himself. If we trace it all the way back and we follow it, Wen Wu Ping, who is like the wire fu guy, right? So everything he did in the 70s to create all the wire fu that you kind of remember if you think of any of that stuff, all the stuff they put
yeah.
into the Matrix, shot it really well, added the digital effects, and then he's responsible for a lot of the 90s and early 2000s stuff. Beautiful things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, House of Flying Daggers, all of these
Here's a
awesome
deep cut for
movies.
you. Austin Powers and Goldmember.
Right.
There's a high
Yeah.
wire scene in there with Fat
Yep.
Bastard.
Yep.
Very hilarious. Sorry, I just had to.
Which is that was a knock on the fact that,
Yes.
hey, this is what's happening in our industry right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
right? Like this is basically all we see. And
Yeah.
then you see, amazing martial artists like Gordon Liu, who's basically created a career of just showing up, being a badass, and then, sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he's a bad guy. When he's a good guy, he wins, and if he's a bad guy, he eventually dies in the movie. And just like very cool, interesting things there that again planted seeds in the minds of the young programmers who
Yeah.
became video gamers who now incorporate those movements into the video games that they program. And nowadays they will mocap people and do stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that's just storyboarded. And then they'll just take like a mocap mannequin and do that. And then they'll show the guys that mocapped uh, the character, right? Let's take Mortal Kombat for example. They'll show the guys at mocap stuff for video games, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that's what that did." Okay, cool. You know,
Yeah.
because it's fun
Well,
for
I
them to see it and review it.
you said a number of interesting things in the last like 2 minutes. So I want to tap on a couple of them. First of all,
Sure.
let's kind of work backwards. First of all, with what you're just now talking about, like this storyboarding type thing, I think that they use I could be wrong about this. I think they use the same term in gaming as they do in film, which is pre-visualization. And
Right.
a lot of time, what they'll and this is not Star Wars' fault, but the Star Wars prequels, this really came to the forefront and into the mainstream that this is how you should really go about things, is they would like choreograph a fight, right? Then they would kind of draw what happened. Sometimes the drawing would precede the choreography, and the choreography would be rough, and it would be the stunt team and maybe an actor or two, like, Ray Park or someone like that. And they would kind of try to loosely base whatever the story, right? Some of the choreography on the storyboard or vice versa. And then they would do like a computer rendering with, like you said, like models. And sometimes that choreography might look something similar. Sometimes it'd be super rough and look nothing like what it was going to. But it's this molding of the actual person somewhere, somehow, whether and I think about the original, like Samurai Jack, like Paul Rudish, his animation style, and Genndy Tartakovsky, like somewhere somebody saw somebody do that and then drew it.
Right.
Whether it was on a computer or on, celluloid or whatever, they took their fingers and they made that person's whole body happen on a screen. It is,
Right.
first of all, mind-boggling. Second of all, it's been happening a lot longer than we think it has in evolved form now.
Right.
But you also mentioned The Matrix, and this is so interesting to me for several reasons. One, the original Matrix video game, I think it was The Matrix Reloaded or something like that. That was one of the first video games where like the fight engine was actually pretty smooth and actually kind of
Right.
interesting.
Mocap by Wu Ping's team.
There you go. It had the bullet time effects and everything, so it had the fantasy element to it that we all look for in video games, but it also had such a realistic fight, especially for like PlayStation 2, right? Like this
Right.
is not exactly like the top of the crop. At the time, it was great technology, but now it was a 32-bit or 64-bit or something like that, 128. Not great. So anyway, The Matrix in and of itself, though, like just the line in the first movie where he plugs in and he's downloading all these like martial arts programs and like how to shoot and how to like, espionage, all these things, downloading these programs into Neo's head. And Morbius goes, whatever the line is. And he goes, I know Kung Fu or whatever. And he's like, show me. Like, that is a video game. That is that is Mortal Kombat right there. It was so cool for me in 1997 or whatever that was when that DVD first came out and I rented it and I was like, holy crap. Like that's what everybody who grew up like watching Ninja Turtles, watching Bruce Lee, watching Walker, Texas Ranger, that's everything they ever wanted someone to do to them, right? It was to plug them into some computer that could make them into this badass ninja master. And
Right.
They showed that in a movie, and then they did it in a game, and then they did it in all these other games we've gotten since the late 90s. Max Payne, right? Very
Right.
similar. The Assassin's Creed games, which is one I would really want to touch on those because some of the stuff that they've been able to accomplish with the fight sequences in those games is kind of outrageous. If you really start picking it apart. The new Star Wars games, the fact that you can get a guy like Cameron Monaghan, who, as far as I know, is not actually a trained martial artist,
Right.
give him a lightsaber, slip him in a blue onesie with some white balls all over it, right? And all of a sudden, he's an actual Jedi. And the stuff he's
Right.
doing on screen, while, some of it is probably real martial artists, a lot of it is probably just imagination of the programmers, and part of it is still him, which is wild. It's like you're learning martial arts, but you're not really. But if somebody handed you a sword in the apocalypse, like, you could probably hold your own for a few rounds. It's kind of wild. I'm jumping all over the place, but you just said so many interesting things in that last few minutes. There's like, okay, where do I jump on? And I really should. I feel like Star Wars should get a lot of the blame. The 90s, man, the late 80s and the 90s, like, that kind of culture was really starting to ramp up. And I think that George Lucas being at the forefront of a lot of these things, he just, like, I think he kind of recognized that this was taking off and was like, this is the perfect time. Now we get to show Jedi Masters, right? Like, real Jedi Masters on the screen. Let's not screw this up. And then all the video games after that, like Star Wars video games, even if they're crappy video games, the lightsaber stuff is always cool.
Right. Well, let's point out that a lot of the stuff that they're using now did not exist. They had to make it.
Yeah.
So
it literally
like,
invented it on the spot.
Yeah, so a lot of the blame, per se, has to go to Industrial Light and Magic and all of the crazy artists that
I shouldn't
figure
just
it
say
out.
Star Wars. I said Star Wars, but that's because that's where ILM was built, really. But I mean, into what they are today, right? But yeah, I mean,
and then
those guys are wild.
And now you have the next biggest special effects shop out there, Weta Workshop, which was created to do Lord of the Rings.
Correct. Yeah.
Because before Lord of the Rings, there really wasn't a huge battle, on screen that was not just like, we got 1,000 people, we don't know what they're going to do. Now that was the first CG version of that. I mean, you could talk about all the old epic movies that have all the extras and stuff, but really there was nothing. Even then, they had a lot of limits, right? They had there's 100 people here, and so we need 100,000.
Well,
and
episode 2 and I think even episode 3, they didn't actually build a single clone trooper armor set. Like, they might have done it for just a prop or something, but they did. All the clone troopers were in green screen suits, and it was just 2 actors. Well, 3 if you count Daniel Logan, but Jay Lagaya, I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how you pronounce, or that's how it's spelled, and Tamura Morrison were the only 2 clones that actually that had faces, right? So that in and of itself, they took 2 actors and they made the Grand Army of the Republic out of them. That's freaking crazy.
Yeah.
They put 100 Jedi. Okay, let's talk about this real quick, because it's kind of the opposite. They took 100, I don't know how many they actually did, probably close to 100 actual martial artists, dressed them up in the coolest Jedi robes and makeup and stuff, and let them show off their martial arts in the Geonosis arena. That same sequence of years, we get Star Wars, the Clone Wars game, the Bounty Hunter game, the Battlefront games, the Jedi Power Battle, all that stuff came out during that time. These are some serious games, some serious forays into molding this real world stuff with the digitization and what technology can give the end user, so to speak. Because really, what is it about at the end of the day? Like, I play video games so I can escape the real world and become some hero or something, right? It's not really about the heroism at that point. It's about getting into this place where all the things you love play with each other, right?
Right.
And for me, for you, for a lot of people, especially if you're listening to this, that's probably martial arts and that's probably lightsabers.
Right.
or blasters, or the starfighters and stuff, which in and of itself is a martial art.
Mhm.
But you mentioned Weta Workshop and Lord of the Rings, like ILM. I'm thinking about the lightsaber hilt designs. I'm thinking about the weapon designs from Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
These people who designed them were not necessarily martial artists in the first place. They were able to watch people do this choreography, do this techniques and things, and design like weaponry that actually should mimic that fighting style or be sufficient for that fighting style. Like I think about, again, Legolas's knives, like they're perfect for him. They're perfect for the style
Mhm.
portrayed on film. And then when you play the Lord of the Rings games from the early 2000s that came out, The Two Towers and Return of the King, the combat in those games is intensely cool. Just, it looks just like the freaking movies.
Mhm.
They use finishing moves and combinations that you saw in the film. Aragorn with his longsword, they kind of tried to like really mimic like what it would look like if an orc bound up on your cross guard and you had to like shove it to the side and then you do a finishing combination that made sense from that position. I'd never seen anything like that before until I played those games, and that's the whole reason I even got into those games and Lord of the Rings at all. I had never
Mhm.
read a book. I'd never seen any of the movies until I played the Two Towers game on PlayStation 2, and the combat mechanics and visuals were so beyond anything I'd seen so far up to that point.
Mhm.
Jedi Power Battle's close. But man, I was like so freaking impressed. And now I played that game a few years ago. I was
Mhm.
still kind of impressed. I was still
Mhm.
kind of mildly impressed.
Right.
So where do you think that like this comes from? This ability for game developers specifically. Obviously, we're talking about film a little bit too, just kind of organically. But where do you think this comes from? Where people who aren't necessarily exposed to martial arts in the first place, they can make these like super accurate depictions and then make it interactive for you so that
Sure.
you can hit this button and choose to do this type of slash or this type, right? And not only that, but now we're at the point where if your enemy does this angled attack from this direction and you just hit this button, your character's going to know exactly which parry and slice to do from that angle, right? Like we're seriously going into evolved territory. Where do you think this
Mhm.
ability of these developers comes from to translate stuff that they may or may not actually be familiar with?
So the thing I didn't point out earlier was the prevalence of anime. Um,
Oh yeah.
and because of a lot of anime, it was easier for the animators to do it than rather to animate these things and martial arts and things like that in order to show like a person's prowess or whatever. And then you'll see that kind of thing happen in animation, which in then turn goes into the video game animation, right? So that's kind of the I think where it came from is
That's
like
a good
a
point.
lot of people grew up watching, stuff that you might not think is martial arts anime, but Dragon Ball and
Well, an anime goes back further in history than
yeah,
a lot of people like. I'm not
right.
necessarily an
Well,
anime fan, but it's been around a lot longer than I realize.
right.
A lot of the
So like a lot of things, especially again in the late '90s, early 2000s, there was a little explosion of like here's all these creative things, but a lot of
oh
them
yeah,
had these hyper stylized fight scenes and crazy ideas on how this weapon would work versus this weapon versus all that, and then that came from a lot of it came from Japan, and there was a lot of samurai anime out there, and a lot of that kind of showed up, and then they kind of tweaked it and went, okay, well, let's make it more cinematic, let's do it from this angle, let's make it you know let's do more speed lines, we'll do this whole thing, and to present it that way now permeates in the minds of the people that are making the video games now
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
making the animations for video games now. And they're that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Again, seeds back all the way to the beginning of the film industry, right? Because the visual idea of it has become so well thought out, right,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and well seen. So now different things like before Old Boy, there was no such thing as a hallway scene really until you watch a guy with a hammer just take on 100 dudes in a hallway
Yep.
in one take,
Oh,
and
and
then
then we
you
get Daredevil, right?
yeah, then you get Daredevil who does it a different way, but a different with a better uh, with better technology,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot more choreography than visceral, just like swing away idea. Because a lot of that stuff is showing up with here's my idea, here's how we're planning it, see if you can do it, right? And then when we go to when we get to Daredevil, it's like, okay, there's going to be three Daredevils. We're going to keep the camera moving slowly forward, and you have to go here. This Daredevil is going to take the guy out of the room, and then the other guy
Yep.
will
Yep.
come in, and
Just
and
like a
he'll be
Benny
there.
Hill skit.
Yeah, but it's done in a way that you, as the viewer who's never seen it before,
You have no clue.
goes, "This is amazing! Look
Yeah.
at that one guy do everything."
Yep.
This character versus
And you believe it's
the
the real
filmmaker
actor.
side.
That's the real trick, right?
Right,
Because these
right.
actors are getting such a crash course lately in
Mhm.
in what the stunt people are doing.
Right.
And a lot of time it's still the stunt person really doing it in the final product, but the
Mhm.
actor is still needed for certain like moments, right? So
Yeah.
the mingling is kind of crazy these days.
Right.
That
And
would have
again,
never
that's
happened.
because of the Shaw Brothers
Yes,
movies
yeah, yeah.
and Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan
Yeah.
especially.
I didn't mean to
Um,
interrupt you with that, but it's just
yeah.
I just I have a lot of respect for people who embrace that kind of stuff, especially
Right.
like if you're an actor and you're trying to be like a serious actor, whatever that means, and you get called in to do a Double Dragon remake, right? Like
Right.
you're probably going to have a couple thoughts in your head if you're not already a martial artist about
Right.
like, oh man, is this going to be career suicide or is this going to be something really good for me or whatever? But a lot of these actors now are kind of like, give me that role that kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s wants to see.
Right.
It's not so tongue in cheek like the Street Fighter movie from the 90s is a
Right.
far cry from what we get now from like the Mortal Kombat movies and stuff. A far
Right.
cry.
But also, if you watch some of those movies, you can see the evolution of
Exactly. That's a very good
cinematography.
point. Very, very good
Uh,
point. Particularly the Mortal Kombat movies and games
mhm.
from then to now.
Right, but also looking at that in the lens of video games, one influences the other. So let's talk about something kind of in between. Let's talk about The Witcher and
Yeah.
the actual a lot of these video games that were based on books then became a video game, and our team put this look together, now becomes a series on
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Netflix, and there now there's a bunch of people going, okay, well, how does he move? How does he fight? Okay, let's go back to the video games.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
how he fights.
Yeah.
We have to choreograph a thing like this and go through that. There's a bunch of live action anime um, movies that have to do that as
Yeah.
well. So I don't know if you've watched any of the Rurouni Kenshin movies, but those are on Netflix as well.
I just
They
started one of them recently. I didn't actually
so
get through it yet.
they had a huge problem because in anime you can do to save on animation, you can do these long panning shots of the guys just standing there thinking about what they're going to do.
Right.
But that's so boring to watch
Yes, it is.
if you're watching a movie. So they decided to just create a brand new fighting style for Kenshin in that movie. That was basically he's always going to be moving, and when he stops moving, people just fall down because he's just killed them all, sort of deal. And the only time he stops moving is to take a look and see and say something, and then he's moving again.
Yes.
So a lot of the stuff is like frenetic and crazy, and it just kicks you out of your seat because it's like I've not seen anything like this before. But that's the thing is like.
But that's what a video game is like, right? It's
right
button mashing and crazy going on, right?
Yeah, and so going back to video games, how do you do that same thing?
Yes.
Well, you can't because it's nutty, right? But each piece of media has to have its own flavor of that story.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I love what that point you're making right now.
Yeah. So like when you look at something like, I'm going to throw this under the bus, the Halo series,
okay.
right?
Okay.
There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of fanboys and girls that have played Halo, have an idea in their mind what a Spartan is and what they do and blah, blah, blah. Great. That's done in a video game where you have 20 hours of, maybe less, maybe 10 hours of actual gameplay.
Generally, minimum 10 hours for a decent game, right?
In the campaign, and then, unlimited amount of hours in multiplayer. So there's certain things that have to show up, right, in that. And if you don't see those things, then you're disappointed. And then there's certain things that show up in the series that you're like, that's not how it happened. But none of it actually happened. Does that make sense? There's like this. There's a bunch of things, in that show up, and how people fight and how people are there, and there's these new factions and things like that you're like, what? So there is a line to be walked upon. That's too much somebody else's idea, some new thing, versus like I still want it to feel authentically like this other thing. And
Let's,
so
go ahead. Finish your thought there.
I was going to say, if you look at The Witcher, that's
what I was going to come back to.
Yeah, it went from a book to a video game. But how many people read the books? Let's say a handful. Great.
I actually didn't know it was a book first. I had no clue.
Yeah, it's a book series.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
It's a Polish book series, which is why you probably didn't know that.
Thought the book series came out of the game series, so that tells you where my brain was.
So they made the game, and they made Witcher #1, which was big hit, great.
Gotcha.
Then Witcher #2, even bigger hit, and then Witcher 3 just like exploded.
That was the biggest of the hits, yeah.
Yeah, so you're doing millions of people are actually playing this game and have actually gone through the story and grown with this character, and now you have a captive audience that's been playing it for 20, 30, 40, 80 hours, however long each game. And then, you have the series, and then people are like, okay, if he doesn't show up like Geralt, of Rivia, then I'm not in.
Right.
And then you watch the first episode and you're like, yep, he's a badass, just like I imagined him to be.
Yeah, and they
in the game and in the thing.
They gave, I feel like the martial arts, it was the HEMA community, and I love you guys, HEMA guys. I really, really love you. I do. The depths of my soul, I love you, because some of your teachings and weaponry are just the salt of the earth, in my opinion. Okay, now I'm gonna just let like a little nugget of crap out. Give the guy a break, okay? Don't stress so much about him holding a long sword in reverse grip and then dual wielding long swords like they're like double lightsabers. Just don't. It's a freaking fantasy show. And let me just say, like, I'm the first to point out a stupid use of reversed grip. Okay, I'm the first one. I think I've only seen like 2 or 3 episodes of the Witcher series on Netflix. I should really go back and finish it, but I think they actually did a really great job with that choreography. If you are willing to again, this is coming from a martial artist who actually knows how to use these weapons. Okay, and I actually know that the way he's using them is kind of stupid. But it looked right. It looked correct. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this whole topic tonight is like, Henry Cavill is not a freaking HEMA master. Nobody is these days, but he's not. He was not taught by one. George Silver did not pick up the long sword and teach him what to do. Okay? This is not somebody who has experience. But they have taken this concept from the video game, which the fighting style in the video game is very much like that. He uses long swords like lightsabers. It's just kind of fantasy-like. People are willing to suspend reality to play the game, right?
Right.
Even like the real pucker butt martial artists who train with long swords and things are willing to suspend reality for video games. So grant the movies based on video games and the media based on video games the same grace, in my opinion. Like, if this guy's a monster hunter, like already off the bat, it's stupid, right? Like it doesn't make sense. It's not real. So he can turn that sword backwards all he wants. He's got superpowers, right? Like he's got magic powers. So I no longer care what he does and if it's accurate. I care that it looks correct and that when he clashes swords with somebody, the positioning, the body mechanics, that all looks correct. Because as a martial artist, that's what I'm really picking up on, right? There's 2 million ways to throw a right cross. So pick one, put it on screen, and make that version correct. Works for me. Doesn't have to be the version I teach. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's the same thing with these Witcher movies, with Lord of the Rings, when people talk about, oh, why is Aragorn cutting through chainmail with one quick slash? It's like, dude, because it's a freaking movie, we got to move on with it. Like, we can't have him get into this massive duel with freaking Lurs, the Uruk-hai. We just can't. We gotta have like closure, right? We gotta have some in-your-face crap and then closure quickly. And it has to look good, and it did. So I think we need to give the grace that we give to video games to the other media surrounding those types of interests, if you will. And the same grace that we give like the prequel lightsaber fights, give that to the video games. Like, I wasn't super impressed initially with Jedi Outcast, but then as I played the game more and then as I played Jedi Survivor, I was like, oh, actually, no, like they did their homework well enough, you know, like they did a good, especially in Jedi Survivor. We talked about that in our episode, just how the swordplay really was well thought out. But the Witcher games are really interesting to me. They're kind of a happy medium between like the traditional action adventure, like Lord of the Rings type stuff from the early 2000s, and then they bridge that gap into like the realm of games like Assassin's Creed, the later Assassin's Creed games and the remasters, as well as like Ghost of Tsushima and Sekiro, stuff like that. These sort of hyper refined games.
On that idea of Ghost of Tsushima, it's an interest. That's another interesting thing, because in most fighting games, right, you have these things called hitboxes. So a hitbox is a region. Oh, you okay?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I come from a very moist part of the United States, and right now in Ohio, it is like dry as a bone.
Oh, sure. So in Ghost of Tsushima, you see, you basically have this idea of a hitbox. So a lot of the stuff in the video game, kind of, you have to turn off.
Are you finally playing that game? Sorry, I know you didn't play it yet.
No.
Okay.
I'm not, but I watched a couple of sword masters break it down.
Yeah.
But there's this thing called a hitbox, and this happens in a lot of video games, where you have to just be in the region. Like if you're let's pick Street Fighter, there's a high block and a low block. There's no medium block, right?
Right.
There's no middle block. There's a high block and a low block. And it goes to Tsushima. Wow, I can't even say the word anymore.
I know.
Um, in Ghosts, if you parry or if you just hit the button, he parries no matter where that sword is. A couple of other games do that.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
I feel like
was it
all the Star
God
Wars
of
games
War?
have that I
Yeah.
think it actually started. I could be wrong. I think it started with Jedi Power Battles. The L1 button was block, and now in most sword fighting games, the L1 button is block.
Yeah, well, there's now a parry mechanic in a lot of things because
Correct.
again, like
Correct.
all this stuff evolves, right? Before it used to just be a block in Street Fighter. Now there's a parry if you hit it at the right exact time,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so
Or a
there's a
deflection
bunch
or
of
so forth and so on.
yeah that you can turn into a counterattack. So a lot of this stuff shows up. The reason I brought up Ghost is because I just saw the Sword Masters break it down,
Right.
and one of the things was like, well, his sword for the parry was down low, but he parried it even though the thug that was hitting him was trying to hit him in the head. Kind of a suspension of disbelief, but I understand why that has to happen because you could only do so many things.
Right. You
Because
only have
there's
so
so
many
many
buttons
things.
on the controller.
Yeah, and so and that's part of why video games are so much fun is because you experience the hero's journey through that whoever you
Well,
control.
when you
Right.
have a sort of a, it doesn't even need to be bad. It just needs to be not as good as the last one you played. If the combat mechanic is kind of, I think of the Batman games. When we'll get back into the Batman games because they're really part of the topic I'm talking about. But if the game mechanics just aren't quite as good as the last one, like it really takes you out of the story, in my opinion, and it can really cause. When the like Ghost is so smooth. Oh my gosh, the combat is so smooth, and sometimes the combat is not smooth. It makes you not even want to play the game.
Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. That you made me think that though, like, you said the reason that like it's so much fun and you get into it, right? But that is a testament to the ability to kind of take all this huge concept of like like in Ghost. Let's just stay on this topic real quick. That's like we're talking about Japanese swordsmanship. That is not like a topic that people take lightly, right?
Right. Especially
And
the Japanese.
yeah, and it is also not a small set of mechanics to put into a video game. If you're really trying, they gave him 4 fighting styles in that game, 4 sword styles in that game, plus the other mechanics and the 2 different bow and arrows and the blowgun and the throwing. Like these are all aspects of Japanese martial arts. Okay, and they're legitimate aspects, and the stuff that they did in the mechanics. It's like, man, you really had time to like 4 different sword styles, and they're all actually kind of accurate, like pretty freaking accurate, and varied and stylistically distinct. But all can be done with how many buttons are on a PlayStation controller, right? Like 18 or less. I don't even know how many buttons are on a PlayStation. It's not many. And he can do
There's
all
10 plus directional pads.
Okay, so 14 plus your map button, right? So this guy can do all of like 30 years worth of sword training in 14 buttons.
Right.
Okay, I don't even know where to start on that. It's like, but I think kind of what I'm also getting at is like, how do you not sort of learn martial arts from playing video games nowadays? How do you not like sort of just through osmosis become like a low key like blue belt? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, a lot of that I believe is I call it thumb fu.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes. Oh, that's the
so,
name of this episode. Thumb Fu. I love it.
so it's basically you can do it, right? You can see it. You can see the animation in your head.
Yes, yes.
But much like telling somebody how to walk across the room using only your words, right? Left foot, right foot. Okay. Make sure that you lift your heel on that back foot before you put it down. It's a lot harder to do in real life.
Dude, I could sense like the sweat forming on your brow as you tried to figure it out just now.
Yeah. It's like one of those things that you can just see that it's okay, this might be, something you can easily do with a strike of the A button, right? But is it something that permeates within you? Can you do it? Or do you even want to do it? Do you want to get off the couch
Yeah, yeah,
to actually pull this off?
yeah, yeah.
And a lot of it is, a lot of the answer is no, you know? So, and then God bless them. There are some people that walk into the dojo
I
that,
I have to
that go,
I have to
hey,
shout out to one of my students. He may actually be listening right now. One of my students, Clayton.
mhm,
He is pretty new. He's been in for
mhm.
about 2 months now.
Yeah, I remember
And
Clayton.
okay, yes, okay. So Clayton now, um, like I'm starting to realize. I turned him onto the podcast. I sent him
Hmm.
our Holocron playlist because
Hmm.
I'm hoping to start our lightsaber program here towards the end of the fall, closer to Thanksgiving here, and
Hmm.
he's one of the people who has expressed quite a bit of interest. But I'm starting to gather that this guy has kind of wanted to learn martial arts, uh, get himself in a little better shape, and just like learn, right? And he's an adult, a full-fledged adult, but just like take this new beginner experience on, and I think largely because of things like video games and movies.
Right. Which
Super
is
super nerdy
great.
dude, in the best way.
Eh,
But yes, it's exactly the type of person you're talking about, and it's a small percentage of people.
right. And that's great. I mean, a lot of people, like I said in the beginning of the episode, whatever that spark of inspiration that said, "Hey, I actually want to do this in real life," that's something you
Mm-hmm.
got to ride.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people, that email me and there's like, "Hey, my kid really wants to do this. He's always wanted to do it." Blah blah blah. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, but your kid's 5. Are you sure it's not you that wants to do it? You know, so it's a lot of that because
I have to temper that
nowadays,
myself as a dad. I have to temper that notion.
yeah. But that's what I mean though is that there is that inspiration. And it's still there, and it's in everyone to want to walk in and do martial arts. Why? Because it's in our culture. It's everywhere. It's in our video games. It's in commercials. It's in
Yeah.
a lot of things. Everybody knows the the culture of Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
knows the reference of wax on, wax off, even if
Mm-hmm.
they've never seen the movie,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there's that sort of um, idea, and then it shows up in your video games, right? The superheroes aren't as cool as they are if they didn't do martial arts in the movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like you even watch the original Iron Man, he doesn't do a lot of martial arts, but starting in Iron Man 2, he's hitting that wooden man,
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Well,
so
and
there's that,
I,
and
I
that's because of Robert Downey Jr.'s training with Sifu Jeff
I
Orem.
was gonna say, but didn't he kind of pick that up later in life, just kind of as a way to like get back in shape and get
Yeah,
his
so the
well, and
story, the
maybe
story
deal
that
with
I
Robert
heard,
Downey Jr.'s demons and such.
yeah. So he picked Wing Chun, and Sifu Jeff Orem, who I met, he's a great guy. He basically just did private lessons at his house and beat the shit out of him. Basically, he was just like, okay, in order to beat your demons, you have to participate in now. And
Yeah.
he put his fist in his face and go, "Where's your mind?" It's like, are you paying attention to now? Or are you thinking about drugs? And he'd go and he trained him and he did Wing Chun for years, and he's still doing those. But it's like one of those things that martial arts will do for you. It will focus your mind and body and put it into the same space.
And this is the
So,
type of person still. This is not
mhm,
necessarily the guy like Clayton who is experiencing other people's work and inspired to do something about it himself. This
right,
is now somebody who's making the work and is
right,
inspired by the stuff that he's been a part of.
right.
Other martial artists and films and things. But
Hmm.
I actually go to the Sherlock Holmes movies. Like
Hmm.
that Wing Chun is a big part of it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of art, right? It will inspire you, hopefully, to do that. And
That
movies
fusion
are
is
art.
serious.
Yeah, and then video games are participatory art, because somebody has to sit there and play it. Yes, you can, I guess, watch actual plays and watch somebody else do it, but you're still experiencing the story through somebody else's eyes and everything like that. But really, the point being is that martial arts is in our culture. It'll show up in many ways, and whatever spark of inspiration throws you into that. Video games are one of the biggest industries, right? It's
Yeah.
it's multi-billion-dollar industries, and everybody knows that if you want to do any sort of action game, you got to throw some sort of martial art in there,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
it's something as simple as Laura Croft shooting guns and being able to throw a knee and an elbow in there every once in a while, shooting a bow and
Right.
arrow,
Right.
or it goes all the way to, you know, Connor in Assassin's Creed 3 and actually getting Native American martial arts artists in there going, okay, this is actually how you use a tomahawk, you know, and be
It's
able
so
to,
good.
yeah, and then because I know you love Assassin's Creed and I do too, the each game bringing in new ways of movement, being going
Yes.
in and getting different mocap guys to do the stuff to
Yeah, let's
create a
talk.
different
Let's talk
flavor.
Assassin's Creed a little bit because
Sure,
I'm replaying Assassin's Creed 3 for like the third time,
sure.
fourth time, and I'm replaying Black Flag or just replay. I replayed.
Hmm.
I don't know if you played Freedom Cry. That's another. So I think with Assassin's Creed, the neat thing about it is I'm gonna be careful about the way I say this, but I think
Hmm.
it's accurate and I think it's fair and I don't think it's in any way offending anyone. They treat each playable character as if they are an indigenous culture to the martial art they use, if that makes sense. So let's just take Assassin's Creed 3 really quickly. You start out the game as the British Templar Haytham Kenway, right? Connor's dad.
Yeah.
And
Spoilers.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the game's been out for what, 10 years now. So,
Yeah. Nearly 20, but yeah,
is it really been that long? Holy crap!
it's like mid 2000s.
Wow. Okay. So anyway, well, that tells you how ahead of its time it was. But his fighting style, first of all, it's it's Makashi, if you will. Okay, just based on our audience, it's Count Dooku, and he really does that. It's very much a European swordsman. The way his footwork is, the stance, even the sort of flashier movements, they're very prim, proper, and to the point. Every single one of them. And to me, it's very indicative of those who are indigenous to those European countries, right? It's a European swordsman right there in front of you. That's who he is. Then you fast forward to playing as Connor, and
Right.
you can you start out with the stone tomahawk, the bow and arrow, right? Like sort of things that you consider native, the long knife. So very clearly part of that indigenous culture to the Americas. However, later on in the game, and you mentioned the different like Native American mocap people, that is like their martial arts, they keep them close to the vest. They do not
Mm-hmm.
just share them with people.
Right.
And anything I've been able to learn has been from asking permission very, very humbly and just watching. Just watching. Because a lot of times that's all you're allowed to do as somebody who's not part of that culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That's how you learn a lot of time, right? Monkey see, monkey do. Master Splinter did it. Your children do it.
Mm-hmm.
But with Connor, you get that very, very distinct je ne sais quoi, that thing you can't really put words to it. You can't really describe what it is, but that's how Mohawk Indians fought. Right? Like there's like a viciousness, but like an athleticism to the way that the Native Americans used their weapons. And those weapons were very distinct. The tomahawk, yes, it was a quote unquote axe, but it didn't start that way. It started out as like the jawbone of a deer strapped to a stick. So this is like the fighting style that comes out of that is visceral, is the word that I think of. Vicious. Mm-hmm. It's like very sort of raw, but also beautiful, because they practiced in dance in a lot of the time. Like their kata was like a dance, a true dance. And they would practice it together by the fire. They'd, spar with, their stuff. Anyway. But then you pick up a sword, right? Like off of a British soldier later in the game as Connor. And he doesn't fight with that sword like Haytham Kenway did in the beginning of the game. He fights with that sword like somebody who has fought against European swordsmen with his own style. So he still like has some of the like sort of more athletic motions, almost more like a Taru-ness to the sword style, but it's still like a feasible way to use a rapier or a feasible way to use a cutlass, versus like just plugging a new weapon into his hand and using the same motions for everything. You know what I mean? He picks up a war club and he uses it differently than when he used the tomahawk. He picks up a sword and he uses it differently. He picks up a spear or a musket and he uses it differently, but he also uses it differently than the other playable characters. There aren't many games that can do that. And I think Assassin's Creed 3 did it better than almost all the other Assassin's Creed games did. That ability to like the chameleonic nature of the martial arts in that game was really pretty incredible. I don't know that the developers didn't have martial arts backgrounds themselves, but I don't know what the ratio of mocap to it just, I play that game again and again and I'm still stunned at like how accurate it all is. Like you said, the what did you call it? The strike zones or whatever. Like,
the hitboxes.
Hitbox, like the animations that are triggered and the finishing moves and stuff, and like I've sparred with a tomahawk and a long knife before. I taught like a year and a half of that. I had it, so we sparred with it so much that my students were like over it by that time. And that's a lot of the ways that you have to move. You have to move your body because you're not parrying and binding like you would with a sword, right? Somebody cuts at you with a sword and you have a tomahawk or an axe. You're not like binding and winding and doing makashi. You're freaking moving your body way the hell out of the way, smacking that sword as hard as you can, and then driving that axe into their neck right away. Like it's a different thing. But okay, fast forward to Black Flag. Then you have Edward Kenway, the Welsh pirate, right? Like, this guy fights like a pirate, like a European swordsman who has no class. You know what I'm saying? And has no concern for propriety. He's swinging from ropes onto ships and cutting people down. Freedom Cry. You have the Bahamian. I forget his name. He's Edward Kenway's what head come on
First mate?
quartermaster
Quartermaster.
in
Okay.
Black Flag. And yeah, I don't know if he's first mate too. He might have been both. I don't know at some point. But he's the main character in that, and he fights with like almost like an African style. Yeah,
Sure.
and that's a big ass continent. I get it, people. Don't come at me, okay? But a style that one type of African tribe might use, or more specifically, like a Caribbean style, like somebody who came over on a slave ship but had that prior experience and then came to this new place with new weaponry. Again, Spanish swords, English muskets and swords and things like that, but also clubs and wide bladed African style cleaving machetes, right? And his style is vicious. It is disgusting, actually, some of the kills in that game. But again, it's that treatment of it as an indigenous style.
Right.
Go back to the Lord of the Rings games. That was the same thing. I mean, Legolas had his elf style. Aragorn had the style of the sort of classic Knight of the Round Table human man. The dwarves and their big, heavy, or they're small but heavy framed, and their big weapons that they could wield with ease. But the style was not anywhere similar to what you could do as Legolas with your PlayStation controller, so to speak. What are some of the games for you? I know you said Assassin's Creed. You can stay on that if you want. What are some of the games for you like this that like I'm rambling about? What are some of the things that like to you as a martial artist and as a gamer and nerd all together that you're like, oh my gosh, this one you got to play this one, or you like this one really did it for me. Like, what are some of them for you?
Well, there's plenty of fighting games out there, and a lot of them are more stylized or even more fantasy, I guess, than others. So there's literally too many to talk about. But
Couple standouts.
Some of the games that I really remember putting a lot of time into because I wanted to see the martial arts that were in the game were games like Virtua Fighter, who in the recent iterations actually, introduced judokas and mixed martial artists.
Oh, that's cool.
And things like that. And it does take a bit of actual thumb fu to pull off their combinations. Games like Tekken, again, going into the fantasy part.
I'm
there.
terrible at Tekken. Oh God!
But there are hints of things, and usually you'll see the hints of those actual martial artists and those mocap people. At the end of the game when they do their katas. Right, Mortal Kombat has started doing that once they introduced the character Kenshi.
And they introduced fighting styles in Deadly Alliance where you could, and they gave them like real names, like that. Yeah. I don't really think they necessarily resembled the real martial art, but like Sonya Blade did Kenpo, and then she did Eskrima, right, or whatever the case was. So
yeah, they introduced weapons, so they did the whole thing there.
But they had like two fighting styles and then a weapon style, right? And they gave them real names of real martial arts. Hungar, I remember that was in there. Kendo or Kenjutsu, I believe, was one of the ones that they. Anyway, the fighting games. I'm not a real big fighting gamer, but the thumb fu thing is real in that regard. I'm sorry.
I have not actually logged in as much time as some of my friends in some of these games.
Shout out Kenny. I know you're listening, Kenny. Kenny,
but it's 2,000
hours of Tekken a day,
and Skyrim. But yeah, I mean, they're in the culture. So any game, like, all right, let me go in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah,
The
go
first
for it.
game that I played with martial arts in it was The Legend of Zelda. Link had a sword and a shield, and
Yeah,
that was it. That was it.
and that
And it was a
sword,
tiny little polygon guy.
I know,
But I was like, yeah,
that
I'll
sword
make
just
a
appeared in
cardboard
front of
sword.
him, right? It just
Yeah.
appeared.
Well, the old man gave it to him in the cave.
No, I mean like
Um,
when you press the button, like it just like didn't the sword
oh,
just like
shot out.
flash out
Yeah,
in front of you and then it disappeared?
yeah, yeah, yeah. But then, in time, they came out with, the sequels and stuff, and they actually had to get somebody to go, okay, well, he's going to swing his sword like this. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
the next game. And
hmm
they're different things, but like, when you look at that, you kind of go, okay, well, somebody had to put some thought into this.
hmm
Okay, well, did they just make it up right then and there, or did they go and find something to bring it from?
yeah,
Something to something to copy into their game.
hmm
So the very first Mortal Kombat actually used like a motion capture camera,
yeah,
and they had guys do it, and then it went from there and became like the mocap suits. I mean, we saw
yeah.
that in the last season of Clone Wars, right, with Ray Park and oh man, what is the name of the stunt
Lauren Mary
woman?
Kim.
Lauren Mary Kim, going through as Ahsoka and Darth Maul, and then so you're looking at you're looking at just the way the motion capture has changed that, and watching people go through like XCOM and um, Call of Duty and some of these other games where you stealth and you have to finish somebody off, in different ways with different styles of martial arts,
hmm
with a
hmm
gun, with
hmm
a
hmm
knife, with whatever. All that's martial arts, and all that stuff. If whatever your flavor of it is, it's here, and
Splinter
most
Cell
people,
comes to mind.
yeah, yeah, and most people will get something out of that, and they'll remember
hmm
those things. But it does take, that kick in the butt to actually get in the dojo or
hmm
go to the gun range or whatever it is, whatever type of training it is, to actually go and do it. And yeah, whoever trains more will actually be able to do it. Whether it's, uh, I mean, within the confines of reality. I mean, I don't know how long you'll have to train to actually throw a Hadouken, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I I I think sometimes people who are nerdy and they love to play video games and they think to themselves like, man, if I could only like if I could only do what Connor Kenway can do, right? Like,
Right.
first of all, nobody's attacking you with a bayoneted musket these days, and you
Hmm.
don't need to defend yourself with a tomahawk and long knife. But
Right.
um, just not everybody can play soccer, right? Not everybody
Hmm.
can lift heavy weights at an Olympic level, or not everybody even wants to try. And
Hmm.
so I think martial arts is kind of a catch-all athletic activity for people who don't really like other athletic activities. It's a very personal thing. So these people who are starting out as a nerd and then they want to try, like they play video games and they're like, man, like I just want to be a video game character some days. Like
Yeah.
you can do that. Like
Yeah.
you first of all, your martial arts teachers, like don't be embarrassed by that being your reason for getting into it, because
Hmm.
90% of your martial arts teachers got into it for the reason of Ninja Turtles, the reason of Star Wars, the reason of Power Rangers, the reason of Walker Texas
Hmm.
Ranger, Bruce Lee. That's the reason
The
they got into
Princess
it.
Bride.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't. Yeah, true. Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, even. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
these are just the things that, like, that's what people were into. Jackie Chan movies, the old
Hmm.
Drunken Master stuff.
Yeah.
People, the martial arts teachers did they were into it too, and
Yeah.
they're into video games too, right? Like,
Hmm.
I think it's just so natural, the progression to get into the dojo or get into the gym as a result of being into like video games and stuff, I think that you shouldn't be embarrassed that that's the reason you're into it. Maybe you should even, like, if you're sort of shy or anxious about trying, tell your martial arts, or tell the coach, like, I like video games. I kind of just wanted to try and see if I could do this. Like, I like to play fighting games. That's why I'm here. Like, if I had a nickel for every kid who told me, or kid, now they're older, but like everybody when I was like learning how to teach and stuff, Dragon Ball Z. That's why I like Dragon Ball Z. That's why I'm here. Or my kid likes Dragon Ball Z. My kid likes Ninjago. So I figured I'd sign him up.
Right.
Like, okay, that's perfect, because you're already interested. The hard part is done. Now the really hard part is just up to you. Just take like 2 steps past the gate, right? And I think that if you had that conversation sometimes with the teacher, like, I'm kind of a nerd and I wanted to do something nerdy. Again, shout out to Clayton. Like, as soon as I brought out lightsabers, like, I could see the drool forming in his lip, and I knew that, like, this guy is now a martial arts student. Like, he's now going to be a martial artist for it, maybe not for life, but until fortune makes it impossible for him to do it anymore, he's going to be interested. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's the other thing too. If we wait for perfection, we'll never improve.
Oh yeah.
So if there is a spark of inspiration to go do something, I mean, martial arts is a great thing too, but maybe you wanted to always learn how to play a specific musical instrument, or maybe you wanted to learn how to dance the flamenco or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But any sort of creative outlet and activity, like martial arts, right? Because art is in the name. It's a thing. That gets you off your couch and participating in your own life, and into hopefully feeling better. And yeah, it's the most athletic. Well, maybe not the most athletic, because dance is pretty rough too. But you will have to use your whole body to express yourself in both of those things.
Yeah.
And even some instruments. Geez.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Whatever it is, you have to go get up and do it. And to our strength and our weakness, the lightsaber kind of brings all of that together. The nerddom that you can have just sitting there on your couch watching it, and the martial arts, the exercise, the confidence building, the whole shebang, and put them together. That's kind of a strength, and that's also the weakness, right? Because a lot of times people try it and they go, "Wow, this is hard." It's like, yeah, it's supposed to be, but that's also why you keep doing it. And a lot of people kind of miss that. And I don't charge a lot for my classes. I basically charge enough to rent the space that we have. And because there's no way to as far as, well, we've been doing this for a little bit more than a decade. My school started in 2015, so yeah, just about a decade of doing just martial arts with lightsabers. I've done martial arts much longer than that, but like to actually have the stuff and do it, we've only had it for about 10 years, right? So this is the time. This is your rally cry. Go out there, swing a lightsaber. If you're being active and doing it, at least you're training. If anybody goes out there and yells nerd at you while you're in the park swinging your lightsaber, they're actually going, "I wish I could be you."
Yeah, you're winning.
Yeah, because they saw you and went, "Well, that's pretty nerdy." And in the back of their mind, like, "Man, I wish I could do that. Maybe I wish I had the confidence to swing a lightsaber in the park."
Well, I'm a big believer in sweat equity myself. Like, I don't really like in the sort of the principle of like counting calories or, weighing myself or things like that. I don't really care. But I do care that when I spar or when I go in for a workout, or even if I just like, I saw something in a video game and I wanted to try it, right? If I have sweat on my t-shirt when I'm done, then that's what I'm looking for, right? And I think a lot of times too, people who maybe get into these things as a result of their nerdiness, a lot of times it's to get in better shape, right? Because us nerds, we like to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos. We just do. We like Mountain Dew. You know what I mean? We like to stay awake until 4 a.m. playing video games, wake back up at 8 a.m. and play more video games. We just do. And that's totally fine if you also move your body once in a while. And I think just breaking a sweat is like so important. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But it's a good way to do it. Let me bring up Andy real quick, Bede, who I've brought up many, many times on the show before, my old co-host and one of my best friends. He is, I've always said, like a very natural saber fighter. He's had zero formal martial arts training aside from like me showing him little things here and there. And I would say, I don't want to say I'm responsible for, but I'm probably largely responsible for his notion of the 7 forms. He's got a great handle on the lore of that and in even the martial arts lore of all that. 'Cause he reads a crap ton. He plays a lot of video games. He listens to me when I say like, oh man, this is right out of blah, 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 blah. When I see something on a screen or whatever, we play the games together. We talk, right? We spar together. He's become an actual saber martial artist because we spar together and things. He was my first sparring partner to start trying this stuff out. But you know how this guy learned how to swing a lightsaber competently? He freaking watched the Lord of the Rings video games that I was talking about. He freaking played Jedi Power Battles from 1999 on the PlayStation 1. And he took like his favorite characters, Legolas and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and tried to do every single motion exactly as they did it with a broomstick that he kept stealing from his mom, kind of thing. With his $5 Hasbro lightsabers. And we bent so many of those freaking Hasbro lightsabers, and we broke broomsticks, and we like paused video games and said slash to the left, slash to the right, upward, spin, stab behind. Like that's right out of Jedi Power Battles, by the way. Square, 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 triangle, Obi-Wan Kenobi combination. It became this kind of thing where he would stand there and go, here, stand right there. Like, you're a battle droid. Okay. If I did that combo, like cut here, cut, like we would literally do that crap. You're learning martial arts. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to let anybody know that you're that big of a freaking nerd. Okay. And you can low-key become a badass in your own living room. In my opinion, and I shouldn't even be telling you that. I should be telling you to go to your martial arts gym and pay that person because, first of all, they don't get paid enough. Second of all, it's worth your time and money. But if you don't, you can sit there in your living room and become a martial artist. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. You can. You can watch YouTube and video games and movies and come up with some semblance of at least a kata, right? A form, some combinations that look like they make sense. I mean, you could watch the new Roadhouse movie with frickin' Conor McGregor and learn how to do a good jab cross into some knees, right? So I think it's becoming this world where I don't know, maybe the AI is really kind of taken over in a sense, but like the virtual reality is becoming the reality, and the reality is seeping so hard into the virtual that the line is so blurred as to what's what anymore. The Witcher movie is the Witcher game, is the Witcher book, right? Like it's all the same now. Same thing with Star Wars. You read a comic book, it feels like you're playing the video game. It feels like you're watching the movie. It feels like you're reading a novel. And I think that that's super important because you are kind of in a way maybe inspiring people who wouldn't really see the light of day otherwise to kind of swing a lightsaber in their backyard. You know?
Right.
Nobody's watching. Just go ahead. Just give it a try. And now you have like
Right.
Saber flow artists on TikTok. Well, I guarantee most of those Saber flow artists, they're just people who like to play video games and stuff and watch Star Wars movies, and they just have a lightsaber now.
Right.
I think it's all worthwhile, and I think that you can learn that now. Okay, we're I guess we're coming up on time. I mentioned I wanted to talk about the Batman games. Let's just really quickly do that, because as a martial artist, I feel that the Arkham City game is probably the finest example of one of the finest, because Assassin's Creed 3 is up there. Character martial arts, as well as sort of the smoothest gameplay for the average nerd who's not actually trained to feel like they kind of understand this thing a little bit. They kind of understand martial arts. Again, Bede, like, he played the Arkham City game, and he started racking up like these 150 move combinations with Nightwing, and just like sort of like breaking down like this parry, strike, counter strike, like these combinations just started making like martial sense to him, right? I think that the Thumb Fu in that particular edition, but the Batman fighting style is so interesting to me as a martial art, and then as a video game martial art too, because it kind of started with the Batman Begins movie. The guy who, I forget his name, but the guy who choreographed those sequences and that style, who came up with the fighting style for Batman, based it largely off of, get this, Batman. Like, he didn't say like, oh, Batman knows judo and jujitsu and shitoryu, which he probably does know all of. He said Batman fights like this. Batman has this kind of suit. He's got spikes on his forearms. He's got armor here, but not here. He's got, all black, or he's, but the bat symbol is armored more. And then, he can't move he can't turn his neck in this movie, right? But like all these things, the other part of it was he's fighting overwhelming numbers, so he has to protect himself at all times. So everything was elbows, hammer fists, a lot of Muay Thai type checking and guarding, but then a lot of almost Kenpo and Krav Maga, like counter striking and stuff. Everything was close to the body until it didn't need to be, a leaping knee or something like that. But there was also that element when they got to the video game. They took that same idea of blocking and parrying and counter striking and the elbows, the hammer fist, the knees, stuff like that. But then they added back in those elements of like the ninja style with the fancier kicks, the leaping off of the roof into a takedown and those kinds of things. They even put a little bit of jiu-jitsu in there, leg breaks and arm bars and chokes and things like that. That for me is like everything I want as a martial artist. It's got the fantasy character personality in the fighting style. It's got the cool Thumb Fu aspect. When I watched the movie that started it all, I get it. Right, I get why this character fights this way, and the moves make sense, and it is different. You watch Batman Begins, and you're like, this is not necessarily what I thought Batman was going to do, but it makes total sense, and it works. I don't know. Did you play those Batman games?
Yeah, those were fun.
So, am I the only one here who is having this wet of a dream of thinking about it, so to speak. I know that's probably not age appropriate for our podcast, but I mean, it just I was really like, I've played that game Arkham City so many times. I just played Gotham Knights, a few months ago. Did the same thing for me. Like Robin had his own fighting style, Batgirl had her own fighting style. Like, and it made sense based on the equipment that's the thing. Like, you can't just like base a video game character off of a guy doing karate, right? Because the guy doing karate is wearing a gi, he's in bare feet in a dojo doing karate style, right? So you can't just like base a character off that unless it's Ken and Ryu, right? But what you can do is take elements from the things that would like you can take elements from the karate guy, you can take elements from the Muay Thai or from the and you can do all that. So I think, man, I lost the train a little bit. I got so
You're
excited.
talking about equipment,
Dude. Oh, that's what it is. A lot of martial arts, they don't take into account the equipment actually being used, right? And so Muay Thai, big boxing gloves, elbows, knees, sweeps, right? So if you just based a video game off of Muay Thai style, it'd probably be pretty freaking boring. That's any style. That's not a knock on Muay Thai. That's any style. If you just did a kung fu game, it'd be great for it, but you'd have to really start including all the different styles that you could possibly include to make it last more than 15 hours of fun. Ghost of Tsushima had to put 4 sword styles and a bunch of ranged weaponry and some extra elements into it to make it as fun as it was and to last as long as it did without just getting bored. So I think to recognize the tools of the character, it does a lot for martial arts too, right? Like if you start thinking about the Batman style and what would I do if I had to wear a suit where I couldn't turn my head, but I had spikes on my forearms and my shins, and people were trying to stab me all the time and shoot me with Tommy guns, and I had to be faster than them and more elusive. Like, it kind of makes you think, as a martial artist, how can I kind of be a little more like Batman when I spar, I don't have to fight in that style. I don't have to learn that style, but like, when I block a punch, do I need to do like this full block out there in front of my face like I learned in my kata? No, I could just put an elbow up by my chin, like just rest my hand on my ear and smother the strike as it comes in like Batman did. And then I still have all the rest of my tools at my disposal, my punches, my kicks, whatever, my weapon if I'm using a weapon. Or, if you're a celebrity listening to this, a stuntman, and you get to do a Batman movie, first of all, come on the show. We want to interview you. Second of all, you're thinking about that kind of thing, right? Like Ernie Reyes Jr. being Donatello in the Donatello suit all those years ago, right? Like, that changes the way you fight. Yeah, Kaji Kenbo and Red Dragon Karate, but do you know Donatello? Are you a Ninja Turtle? Well, now you strap a shell on and a whole bunch of polymold, and yes, you are now Donatello. You got to figure out how Ernie Reyes Jr. can make up basically a whole new fighting style for himself. That is so cool to me, and I think the more video games like that we get, it can only improve our quality as martial artists. It can only improve our quality as Saber martial artists because more nerds are going to come out of the woodwork and want to participate. And then it can only sell more video games in the long run. So they're winning no matter what. Right. I don't know, Alan. This is kind of been an all over the place conversation. That's largely my fault. I get so excited about video game speak, and I get so excited about video games and martial arts because that's largely how I was able to even put a lightsaber program in the dojo at all. Sure. Is kids' interest in video games and their parents' interest in having them stop swinging broomsticks in the living room.
Right.
So, I don't know. Anything you want to kind of totally wrap up with? You did such a good job a few minutes ago of actually almost wrapping us up. But anything you want to actually wrap us up with?
I would say follow that spark of inspiration, whether it comes from video games, comic books, from cosplay, movies, whatever it is. There is usually a piece of art that inspires you to go and do stuff. And whatever that might be, please go out, live your life by living instead of watching other people live. That's it.
You guys heard it here first, last, and everything in between. We appreciate you listening. Please go check out all the stuff. So we're talking about sabermartialarts.life. We're talking about the YouTube channel. We're talking about Instagram /SMA Foundation. And nowadays, we're also talking about patreon.com/Saber Martial Arts. Please go visit all these things. Become a patron. Become an affiliate of the foundation. Find one of our affiliate schools near you and maybe go to a real class. Go to any gym or dojo near you and just go find out some information, man. Does it hurt to find out some information? Absolutely not. And one day it might actually help. Not just hurt. No, not just won't hurt. Might actually make you healthier and happier. So I encourage you as well, like Alan said, to take up that spark. I also would love for you to check out some of the stuff we've done in the Holocron episodes of the podcast. Go to our YouTube playlist for Saber Martial Arts Podcast, and you will find those Holocron breakdowns, but also you'll find links to those unlisted playlists, and you can sit there in your living room and eat Cheetos and learn martial arts with us, as taught by Sifu Allen and myself. We have been working on trying to get Courtney's footage, some Saberlight footage. So, stuff happens. We have K Sensei. Once he's feeling a little more physically up to it, he wants to do some kendo stuff for us in the Holocron a little bit, and maybe even some Goju Ryu. And I think after this conversation, I've been talking about it, but now I'm truly inspired. I think we're going to be adding to the Holocron some of these video game breakdowns and things, like combinations and things from video games. And Alan, I think I'm gonna put you on a couple of these in particular. I'm gonna find some that I think you would really, really do a great job on, and I'm gonna do a couple myself. And I think if you start with stuff like that, the rest of the road is already paid for you. You'll have no problem becoming, like I said, a little happier, a little healthier, or maybe even a lot healthier. That's really kind of, I think in 2024, all the stuff that's going on, not just in the world, but in people's individual lives, it's just important to kind of maybe take a little time here and there to kind of just get yourself in a little healthier shape, mentally, physically, and a lot of times that just requires that you bring your own saber.
This party's over.